have had. So there are two parts for why the census is so important. One of them is funding, the second one is power. Mayor Adler talked about those two. So now I'm going to introduce Stephanie Swanson, who's going to talk about redistricting and the process of redistricting. Stephanie is currently the issue chair of the redistricting for the Legal Women Voters of Texas, and I'll ask her to come forward to give her presentation so you see what's happened in the state of Texas over the last, I guess, 10 years in terms of census.
Okay, I'm going to do my best with the mic. I'm not very good with the mic, so just call out a reminder if it starts to drift and you can't hear me. I want to thank Joanne for actually organizing this whole event. This is absolutely amazing, and I want to thank her for thinking to invite me. I think Louise probably could have done a much better job than I could have, but I am here nonetheless. So I have toned this presentation down quite a bit. Usually it's very easy for me to get ramped up when it comes to redistricting, and that is a very simple reason behind it, because these lines determine who our elected officials are, and those elected officials then make very important decisions about the quality of our air, the quality of our water, how much we pay in taxes. Very, very important life-changing decisions. So I'm with the League of Women Voters. I always have to say our stance before I start. We are nonpartisan. We never support or oppose parties or candidates. Our mission is to educate, inform, and advocate. And I have 2 slides I have to skip through really quick because I'm not going to have enough time to make it through all of them. This is just a general. We want our elections to be fair. We want our votes to count equally. We want our voices to be heard. Fair elections are the cornerstone of any good democracy. We also expect that our legislators to be held accountable through the power of our vote. And right now that's not really possible. If we want to vote someone out of office for doing a bad job, you have to go and vote in the primary. And we want a representative, theoretically, that's going to represent all constituents. And that doesn't really happen, especially here in Texas. And the reason for that is because of gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is redistricting gone wrong. It's a practice of drawing district lines to favor one party or group of people over another. And there are 2 types of gerrymandering. There's racial gerrymandering and there's partisan gerrymandering. Racial gerrymandering was outlawed when they enacted the Voting Rights Act in 1964. Partisan gerrymandering is still allowed. It went up before the Supreme Court again this past year, and the Supreme Court refused to make a decision on it, so yes, it is still legal. And the major problem with this is that in states, especially like Texas, race and partisanship go hand in hand. So you cannot have partisan gerrymandering without racial gerrymandering. And one of these, one idea, one concept that I want you guys to hold on to throughout this quick presentation is the difference between redistricting versus gerrymandering. Is the purpose of redistricting to facilitate a representative democracy, or is it to improve a partisan advantage? So why do we need districts anyway? I want you to drop yourself back in time, back to the 1800s, and I want you to imagine you're out in West Texas and you have to figure out how to set up a town. So what's the first thing you're probably going to need? A water source. The next thing that comes out is maybe like a line of transportation. Maybe the stagecoach or the train comes out, soon enough businesses pop up, and hey, there you go, you've got a little town. That town has shared resources, and then eventually it will have the same shared culture. So that is what we call a community of interest. And those communities of interest need a cohesive voice of representation to make sure that their needs are going to get taken care of through the government. This is one district that I always like to point out where communities of interest don't really apply here. At least I'm not really seeing that. So it really stresses me out when I look at that, actually. Okay, so this is Lake Fahrenholtz District, Congressional District 27. You see that it actually spans a huge region of the coastal area. That actually looks decent. The part that I have a problem with is the fact that it goes all the way from Corpus Christi And then inland up into the eastern suburbs of Austin and Bastrop. And I want you to think of this in terms of communities of interest. Why is this so bad? So those coastal regions are going to be very concerned about hurricanes and coastal erosion, whereas the people in Bastrop are going to be more concerned about things like drought and fires. How are the maps drawn? And this is a multi-pronged talking point. So the U.S. Constitution mandates that every person living in the U.S., not just citizens, every person in the U.S. must be counted. And there's a very simple explanation for this. We need to be able to accurately size our population in order to effectively govern our state. We need to know where resources are going. And it's not just the government that needs this information, right? It's the business community as well. We also need it to know how we plan out infrastructure, where the roads need to go. So there's lots of reasons why we need this data. So here in Texas, let me start with the census. Sorry, I need to take a step back. So after they take the census, the government will do something called reapportionment. So there are 435 House seats. So they take the total population of the U.S. and divide it by 435, and that will give you your district size. The last census in 2010, I think the average size was about 700,000 people per district. And then they split up those seats based on the state's population. And then that effect trickles down. The Texas State House has 150 seats. The Texas State Senate has 36 seats. So how many people in here have moved over the past 10 years? I have too, right? I've even moved from out of state. So population is changing, it's constantly changing, it's constantly shifting. So we need to be able to figure out where those shifts in populations have gone, and then we need to be able to redraw our districts to account for those changes in population. So we have some basic rules that guide any redistricting process. For the federal guidelines, you want your districts to have equal population, and this goes back to, I believe, Reynolds versus Sims, it's the Supreme Court ruling. Sorry, so that ruling was one person, one vote. And then you also have VRA requirements, and this goes a lot into case law that I'm not very familiar with and I don't want to talk too much about. But basically the point is you cannot dilute the vote of minority groups, basically. There's also state guidelines that they have to follow. For state house districts, this is a very important one. There's the county line rule. And the county line rule means that if you can fit that population into, if one county can fit total population for one district, then you cannot cross the county line, basically. And because of this factor, this is kind of a geographical constraint. So you see less gerrymandering in the state house districts than you do in the U.S. congressional districts, like Whaleford's district, Blake Farnell's district that I just showed you a few slides ago. There was no compactness district, so that those districts spans for some of them hundreds of miles. So who is responsible for drawing the maps here in Texas? And this is probably why the system is so broken. So this is Texas legislator that is responsible for drawing the maps, and the maps are passed as regular legislation. So what that tells you then is that if one party is in control of the legislature, like it is right now, you will have all Republicans in statewide offices and in both the House and the Senate, then they control the process, basically. I want you to also think about our short session. So census data comes down probably around mid-February, if we're lucky. And then they have about 3.5 months to make maps, submit or collect testimony from the public on those maps, and then get them passed through both houses of the legislature. If that doesn't happen, then we have two options available. The governor can call a backup session, a special session, or it can get kicked to the backup commission. And on the backup commission, it consists of 5 people. It's the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, speaker of the House, land comptroller, and the land commissioner. And in order for the maps to get out of the backup commission, you only need three votes. So that kind of tells you how distorted the power is in Texas right now. So Mike's going to shoot me. I know you hate this slide. It really does show a really great, at least to me, what I think of good geographic representation, and that's what I really like to see is geographic representation. So in my head, that's what I would like Texas to look like. And this is the cartoon that I always like to include, and what the constituent wants and what the elected officials actually draw are completely different. So this is what's kind of scary, and I'm kind of here to sound an alarm today. So legislators meet behind closed doors, they consult with data analysts, and they basically draw these districts by going block by block. Here's an example I've pulled out of Congressional District 35 down in San Marcos. You can see the block level detail that went into drawing this district, and how they've actually grouped in the university into Congressional District 35 as well. So what I'm sounding the alarm about today is that the governor has just set up a super PAC in the recent months, and he had one donor who donated $500,000, and they are hiring demographers and mapping consultants to basically do redistricting on steroids, I guess, for the next round of redistricting. So that's very concerning, and that's very concerning that all of this is being done behind closed doors. And I guarantee what's going to happen in 2021 is these maps are already going to be formed, and they're going to pull them out. And to a certain extent, that lack of transparency should concern everyone. I'm actually going to skip that slide because it's so complicated to talk about. I want to give you a quick brief overview of cracking and packing, because those are terms that you always hear when you think of gerrymandering. So on the what is it? That's the 1990s, sorry, it's on my right. I want to point out Congressional District 10. That was Travis County. That was most of Travis County for most of the 1990s. That's what it looked like. And that is what we call an anchor district. Travis County basically had one congressional district in it, and it represented most of Travis County. After Republicans got a hold of the maps in 2003, they basically started fracturing up Travis County. So here it is in 2017. We have 5 congressional districts and no anchor districts. In fact, our districts spread for 100 miles and were mixed in with predominantly conservative rural areas. So there's that District 10. District 10 goes now from the west side of Austin all the way to the west side of Houston. So out of the four out of 5 of those congressional districts are Republicans. They have a Republican congressman, despite the fact that Travis County voted 62% for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Congressional District 35 is Lloyd Doggett. That was a Democrat. I quickly show you this map, but this is what we refer to as packing. So when they drew this map in 2011, they claimed they had good purposes, they being the legislator. The purple area, it's a heat map, so the purple area is a Hispanic population, and they said that they drew this district to give the Hispanic population their voice. And I would just have to strongly disagree with that. And a federal court panel in San Antonio actually did agree with them in 2016. They said that this district was actually drawn to dilute their voice statewide, basically. So does this translate into an advantage? So in 1992, Democrats won 50% of the seats cast, the votes cast, but they picked up 70% of the seats. So in the 1990s, yes, Democrats were heavy on gerrymandering. In 2016, 56% of the votes cast were by conservatives, and they picked up 70% of the seats. So that pendulum switched on us. This is the most important slide here, that if you have one take home, this is what I really want you to go home and think about. So legislators draw safe districts for themselves. And when I mean safe, I mean that the average right now for the state house is around 20%. They have a 20% electoral margin. U.S. Congress is higher, it's about 30%. That is astounding. I want you to think about how many wasted votes are in those districts. So when this happens, the election gets moved from the general election to the primary. And once they're in the primary, they no longer have to compromise across party lines. In fact, they have to pander more to the extremes now. So this leads to polarization. Importantly, we cannot hold our elected officials accountable anymore with our vote in the general election. If we want to vote them out of office, we have to go and vote for the opposing party, or the opposing candidate in the primary. Another problem this leads to is that incumbents get reelected year after year. It's hard to find a challenger, and races will go uncontested. And then because of this, we're left with no choice at the ballot box, and this basically leads to low voter turnout. Why would you want to go cast a vote if there's only one person running? You know who's going to win. So the league stands on redistricting, and this is probably where Louise and I are going to differ a bit, the league stands, we believe that the power of redistricting should be granted to the citizens. We believe that it needs to be taken away from the legislators who have a self-vested interest in what the lights look like. So we believe in a citizens commission, and that citizens commission should reflect the diversity of the community. We would like to have representatives of public interest groups and members of minority groups as well. So the state that actually we use as the model, who set up a very effective and a very fair, I would say, Citizens Commission is California. So when you look at the Citizens Commission in California, they had 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 4 independents. Not only that, but when they went to actually draw the districts, they did not use partisan data. It was done strictly based with nonpartisan criteria. So that means that they got a lot of input from the community on what their districts should look like. And not just from minority groups, it was economic regions, it was educational centers, it was healthcare. And so up on the north side of the state, they had a lot of forestry areas. So they actually took that into consideration where they drew the districts. Also, airports, health centers. So they went from every single congressional district, and they held public hearings there, collected info from the public. I think they did that twice, actually. So there was a meaningful dialogue that was developed with the public, and there was trust that was developed with the public as well. Austin, actually, when we switched to 10-1 to geographic representation, we actually also at the same time set up an independent redistricting commission. We're one of the only cities in the US to have such a redistricting process at the city level. So the league is part of the Fair Maps Texas Coalition, and our coalition, so the California Commission was such an effective model that they won a grant from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government to travel the US and share their knowledge about how they made their elections and their redistricting system more fair and open to the public. So we are bringing them down to Texas, specifically to Austin on September 28th. And we invite you to come out and meet with them and hear about their experiences. You can find out more information on our website, fairmapstexas.org, and Amanda's over there. She's got invites for the events that we have. I do want to point out, though, that in California, because that's the theme right now in Texas, is like California, especially from the governor. And it was a bit startling to hear some of the reactions as I went around to legislative offices this past week to invite legislators out. Some of the reactions were a bit eye-opening for me. So I just want to point out that in California it was conservatives and the business community that led the campaign for the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. And that is because it does not matter who is doing the gerrymandering, the outcomes are the same. You are left with elected officials that you cannot hold accountable. So besides talking with your legislator, I have on the table outside questions to ask to candidates because it's election season. So it's great if you call your legislator and ask them, or tell them that you want them to support redistricting reform, but also take the next step and ask them these questions so they start thinking about these policy issues. Please sign our petition. Everyone take out your phone and sign our petition. Go to our website, www.fairmaps.org. Another important aspect that I wanted to mention really quick is that we are looking for people from the community to submit testimony to the legislator during the next round of redistricting on what you want your district map to look like, how you want your community to be kept whole. Also, we have a business coalition. So if you own a business or if you work with a business that might be severely impacted by redistricting, and I'm going to take that out. If you were against SB 4 or SB 6, then yes, you should be very well aware that that legislation was passed in part because of our uncompetitive districts. So we would like to extend a welcome and to make your voice stronger with us. We're passing a local resolution. So we're calling on Austin City Council, and we're also working on this in Dallas. So we're asking Dallas City Council as well to just pass a resolution against gerrymandering and to call on the legislator to pass redistricting reform. So here in Austin, if you would like to work with us, please come see me after. And that's about it.
So Stephanie agreed to entertain any questions that you might have about redistricting and the redistricting process.
Yes.
All the way in the back.
So you gave a grade to the city's plan, their first district map. Do you think that came out pretty good?
So I have the experience of Peck Young. Peck was a longtime Democratic map drawer. He represented the Democratic Party here in Texas for a long time. And because I know Peck's intentions and because I know Peck personally and I've heard his stories about what went down, I have to honestly say yes. So the way it started was he really wanted geographic representation for Austin. And he had worked a long time with the NAACP and groups like LULAC. And he was very upset with the representation and the quality of representation on the east and the south side of town. He had a story where he said that certain representatives of city council hadn't even been down to the south side of town in 15 or 20 years to see what it looked like.
So the League of Women Voters would suggest to you that it worked out really well because no one was sued.
I just want to say, though, that Peck actually designed the majority-minority districts, and he worked with groups like the NAACP and LULAC to draw those districts. So, yes, I do think it was good.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier that Governor Abbott is putting together a group, including mapmakers, to draw a new redistricting so that they will have a map ready once the 2020 census is complete. Does that mean that they're basing that on estimates as to how many extra congressional seats Texas will get as a result of the 2020 census? If we get an extra 2 or 3 seats, they're going to base the map on that?
I can't tell you what data they were using, but my guesses would be yes, because we already have similar estimates out that say that we're supposed to pick up how they play the citizenship question is going to affect this, but whether we get 2 or 3 seats, basically, yes.
And is there any opposing group or groups working together, League of Women Voters, whatever, to come up with a counter map so that when Greg Abbott produces his maps, there will also be a competing map to say, hey, this is the way it should be.
So while I would like to say that yes, there are groups like that, the NAACP and groups like that will definitely have their own maps going on. They always do, because they're always trying to protect their community, basically. But a general overall map like that, I don't think any one group is working on now.
But there will be many groups that do, and there will be many individuals who do too, because the mapping software is available online for anybody to use.
That's not true, actually.
No.
That mapping software costs 10 grand.
Costs money.
Yeah, and so average citizens don't have access to that. That was one of my big complaints. Yes?
The data, more than the software, right? So what the data that people are using to draw the maps, or Republican maps that make them so powerful, is that they know exactly how people are going to vote. Because Cambridge Analytica, these people have incredible data about who you are. And so by having that data, the software's been there since like the 90s. The data is new, and that's harder to get.
One point that I do want to bring up that I don't think I mentioned was that we no longer have pre-clearance anymore. So in 2013, pre-clearance got tossed to the wayside, basically. And before that, our maps had to go before a federal authority, either the Justice Department or a 3-judge panel, to get reviewed. And in 2011, we did not pass pre-clearance for the maps that we drew. They were actually deemed racial gerrymanders, basically. There were serious retrogressions in the maps. So we don't have that review process anymore. So we do have a coalition called Fair Maps Texas. We have a whole bunch of nonprofits in there, and we are suggesting legislation for the upcoming session. And one of the ideas that we're tossing around is legislation for an advisory committee that could propose plans to the legislator that would look at stuff like pre-clearance used to, basically.
But all they can do is throw open alarms. It's like we have no power to change what is going to happen.
That's right.
Unless in 2018 and 2020, we absolutely vote in more independents or Democrats. It's the only way we can change our future.
I think that there are some Republicans as well who are very upset that we're in the business community about the way the Texas legislature handled last session over SB 6 and SB 4. And I think they will start fighting back because the stem of, like I said before, the stem of some of these problems are uncompetitive districts. They're afraid to vote against the party position for fear of being targeted in the primaries. So we'll see how it goes, I guess.
So let me close by thanking you all for coming, number one. Number two, we will have videos on our website and ask you to share them with your friends, family, and other organizations. Number three, what can you do? You can volunteer for any of the organizations that put this event together because they're looking for people to help with the census. So it's important that you step up and support these organizations either monetarily or voluntarily. And with that, I think I will close. If you have folks in organizations in other cities of population in the state of Texas, we want to share what we've done here with them so that we get this accomplished around the state. Thank you very much for coming. And have a taco on your way out.
Thank you.